No mai haere mai, kia ora and welcome along to the Music 101 interview podcast. I'm Charlotte Ryan and I host Music 101, our flagship music show on RNZ National every Saturday from 1pm. But this podcast is like a great way to catch up on the interviews that we've done that you might have missed. Today I'm taking you back to 1988. At that time, New Zealand was riding the wave of 80s pop culture, and at the forefront was Rikki Morris. He had that pop hit, Nobody Else, produced by his brother Ian Morris, which topped the charts, reaching number one and remained on the New Zealand music charts for 16 weeks at the time. Rikki won a TUI Award, an APRA Silver Scroll Award as a solo artist, but he also played in the Crocodiles and spent a lot of time driving his older brother's band, the Dudes, around. But Rikki has spent the greater part of his music career discovering new artists and musicians as a studio and live music engineer. After all this time, we are very excited to tell you that Rikki Morris has released a brand new album, aptly titled About Time. Yes, it's been 28 years since his last release. Rikki Morris joined me in studio, basking in the afterglow of the Dudes show at the power station, which he was filling in for his late brother Ian Morris. I heard the shows were very great, so I started asking if he'd recovered yet.
I just can't do those late nights anymore. We got off stage at like 11:15 or whatever it was, and I was like, oh my God. And I went into the band room, and Janie, my wife, was like, I think I'm going to go home. Because I don't drink or do any of that anymore, so I just said a few hellos and left.
Yeah.
I was in bed by about midnight.
But still...
and slept all Sunday.
And when you say exhausting, it must have been also you performing that energy that you put out on stage.
Yeah, very much so. And because I haven't played a live gig since the last Dude show in 2020, so I was really rusty. And we rehearsed. We had 4 really long rehearsals the week before, but there's nothing like doing a live gig. And for the Dudes tour in 2020, I got quite fit.
I was about to say, lots of musicians start running and stuff, don't they, before a tour?
And not necessarily for any other reason than I wanted to be present and to be able to enjoy it rather than feeling like, oh my God, we've still got 40 minutes to play. So it's not because I'm jumping around, or it's not about that, but it's just about getting your mind in it, and I'm so you may have noticed, I'm so unfit at the moment, and it's like, so after about 50 minutes the other night, I was like, oh God, like when we sang Bliss, I started seeing stars. I was like, I thought I was going to faint, just because it was so amazing, but also just from singing so loud.
Other footage from that night as well. I saw this just amazing footage, and the whole crowd was dancing. Yeah. But one thing that stood out as well is no one was holding up a camera.
They were during Bliss.
Oh, were they?
All of a sudden everyone just went, oh God, I hate this song.
Do you hate Bliss?
Yeah, no, I shouldn't say I hate it. I respect it, but I was there when Dave and Ian wrote it in Coogee Bay in 1979. They were in Coogee Bay Hotel. They'd just finished a tour with the members, and I went over and did a couple of weeks. Dave and Ian were so disillusioned with the pub rock thing in Australia that they thought, let's write a piss take song.
I've always wondered that.
It was called Piss. Drink yourself more piss, forget about it. And they played it, and the Aussies loved it.
Of course.
So when they got back to New Zealand, they thought, should we do that stupid song? And they did, and now it's like the national anthem of New Zealand. So it was a complete piss take, basically, and it was initially called Piss. But of course, there's no way you can put that on the radio.
No, it wouldn't have done so well with that title. Another song that really captured the hearts of New Zealand was your song, Nobody Else, released in 1987.
88.
I wondered that. Some websites say 88, some say 87.
87 was The Game of Love, which Ian did under the guise of Tex Pistol. We recorded it in 1987, but it wasn't released until October 88.
I was thinking back to that time in New Zealand, and at the time, that was the first year that lotto tickets ever went on sale.
Really?
Apparently. Foot Rock Flats was released.
Oh, yeah, massive.
Apparently the Dunedin sound was coined around that time, which is quite controversial.
Wow.
And Shona Lang released Glad I'm Not a Kennedy.
Oh, yeah, huge.
But I remember as a young music lover, you being on the front of RTR Countdown. Do you have that framed?
No, I don't. I think I do have a lot of those in storage, those RTR. My mum collected everything. It's so sweet. So when she passed, she had like a couple of boxes of stuff. And I collected a bit of it. I must go through them. They'll be all smelly and horrible now, though.
Rikki, you need to look after them, put them in photo albums, so in 20 years you can look through them and remember the good times.
I've still got my music award for winning the Songwriter of the Year.
Take me back to that time. Did you want to be a front man?
It's an interesting one because I'd kind of been in the industry for 10 years or close to. I mean, I was 27 when we recorded that song, 28 when it went to number one. So I was kind of quite old, really, to be a pop star. So I was kind of ready for it, but I only ever wanted to write songs. I never kind of envisaged myself as a pop star as such.
Or a front man.
Or a front person. Yeah, it's interesting because over that time I'd lived in Sydney and I was in the Crocodiles for a little while in the early 80s and then I went to London for a while and then came back to Sydney and then I came back to Auckland. That's when I wrote Nobody Else. So I'd been away for a long time. And in that time I'd kind of been honing my songwriting skills, I guess, and just recording demos and I was on the bones of my ass, basically, through all that time. But yeah, it's interesting. I never kind of envisaged myself as being a front person or being on the cover of RTR Countdown magazine. But when it happened, it felt just so totally normal and so totally natural that, yeah, I took to it pretty heavily. I quite liked it. But it loses its shine after a while. I'm actually quite shy and a bit of an introvert.
A lot of people have been waiting for such a long time for you to release another album.
Me too.
This has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. The only album I've ever recorded was released in 1996, I think it was. Yeah, it must be. So it's like 28 years since I've released an album, which is just, when I think about it, is ridiculous because in that time I've probably written about 300 songs. So it's been a long time coming, yeah.
Why didn't you release more albums?
That's a good question. I made a very conscious decision in about 1997 to step away from that whole thing. The album that I released in 1996 was called Everest. It was produced by Eddie Rayner from Split Enz, and I love it. I think it's a great record, but it did nothing. The songs were too light for the rock stations and too heavy for the for the 91 91 FM stations, and so it kind of fell between the cracks, and I just made a very conscious decision that I'd had enough. I was 96, I would have been 36.
So that's quite deflating, like after you'd put all this effort and love into an album. And
I had a publishing deal and a record deal with Mushroom which went very sour, and it kind of left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about the industry generally. They dumped me, basically. And I did this album with Eddie because he really wanted to do it. So we recorded this album and it stiffed. So I just thought, that's it. I've had enough. We had, I had 2 young kids. I needed to earn a living, So Debbie and I set up a studio in Devonport, which I ended up taking over the studio for that right through to about 2006. So I kind of went behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I'm much more comfortable, to be honest.
I remember a lot of musicians were travelling over to Devonport to work with you.
Yeah. I did a lot of stuff. I did an album with Graham Brazier there called East of Eden. I did 2 albums with Hammond Gamble in that time. I mixed a live When the Cat's Away album there, and just worked with so many people and a lot of young bands. A lot of really young bands.
Is it true that you did one of the first recordings of Gin Wigmore?
Yeah, totally, yeah. For some reason around that time, we're talking about the early 2000s now, there was just this explosion of talent coming out of Takapuna Grammar.
I know.
It was bizarre. It was
what was it?
I think it might have been the Tuck Shop Pies. I'm not sure.
I thought you were about to say teacher.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. There was the Czechs. There was, first of all, it was Finn Andrews from the Vales. He was the first guy, or the first of that lot that came to the depot where my studio was. I remember him turning up at the door knocking on the door one afternoon after school with his school uniform on and saying, "Hi, I'm Finn and I write songs and I'd quite like to record some." So he was the first, and he just completely blew me away on that first session that he did. It was a Sunday afternoon thing with his little band. He had a band called God Boy at the time, just school friends.
Yeah.
But as soon as I heard him sing, I just thought, what? What the heck? And then I found out that his father is Barry Andrews, of course, who was the keyboard player in XTC and Shriekback. And of course, I love those bands. So Finn and I did a lot of recording over the next sort of year or 18 months or so. And he went off and got a record deal with Rough Trade in London. He went back to London. He was young. He was 16, 17. Around that time as well, Gin Wigmore did the same thing. She came in and said, and the thing is that Gin's dad, God bless him, he passed away around that time as well, far too young. Gin's dad was the local chemist. Wigmore's pharmacy was the pharmacy in Devonport. So Gin came in, same thing. She said, "Look, I've got these songs and I'd quite like to record them." Exactly the same thing. I heard her sing and thought, "Oh my, what the heck?"
I know, because her voice is so distinctive.
So distinctive.
Yeah.
And she was so shy and really, nothing like she is now. Tatted up and, rock chick.
Yeah.
She was the complete antithesis. She was so sweet. And she was young. She was really young. And we did the same thing. I did a whole lot of demos with her. And a couple of those demos she sent to the International Songwriting Competition, which is massive. It's a worldwide songwriting competition. And she won it with a song called Hallelujah, which we recorded in my studio. And then the Czechs, of course, were exactly the same. I actually saw them at the Devonport New World. They were all together. And I just approached them and said, "Oh my God, you have to be a band." They just look like a band. And they said, "Oh yeah, we're the Czechs. We're from Takapuna Grammar and you should come down to the Masonic and see us play." And I went to see them and I just thought, wow, these guys are just tremendous. So again, did a whole lot of demos with them. And from that, they got supports with Muse. And didn't they play with Oasis before they broke up? I think they did. I'm sure they did.
That would not surprise me, actually.
I think they did. They got a record deal in England as well from all those demos. And
Rikki Morris, there is a constant thread with these artists, though, is that they worked with you. You were their first engineer. It would be, I imagine, so scary starting to sing into a microphone or being recorded for the first time.
The thing with these guys, and there was another band called the Electric Confectioneers who were incredible.
They were so good.
And there was another band called White Birds and Lemons, the Early Birds. There was a whole bunch of bands around that time. And they all knew each other and they all used to come to the depot and they just jam in my live room. Sometimes I'd get a call at 10 o'clock at night and they'd say, "Hey, Rikki, we want to come down and jam." And they'd jam until daybreak. It was a safe place for them to come and just be creative. If I lived in the UK, I probably could have got some nice finder's fees, but I just sort of feel like I just kind of just pushed the boat out for them a little bit, gave them a bit of confidence to go out. And the other good thing is that with the Czechs, for example, because I used to do live sound back in the early days with the Dudes and the Crocodiles and umpteen other bands, I stopped doing that for about 20 years. And then when the Czechs started to play, they were like, "Oh, we don't have a PA system, haven't got a sound guy." And I was like, "I'm a sound guy, I'll come and do your sound." So it got me back into doing live sound, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Because I love doing live sound and, I make a living out of it.
So then, compared to live sound, where does the songwriting come in for you? Do you love writing songs?
I do. That's what I've always felt was my calling. That's a bit naff, but in an ideal world, I would just write songs for people. Although I have to say that I don't write as much now as I used to. Like, I haven't written a song. I don't think I've written a song this year. But mainly because I've been finishing my album.
Well, I was about to say, you've been compiling these songs. Because on your new album, you've compiled songs that have been written over the last
40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
So even songs that weren't included on Everest, the album.
Yeah, totally. The thing that put me off doing an album for all these years, apart from trying to make a living, I didn't have time to do it. I remember talking to Wayne Bell about it like 10 years ago and saying, I really want to do an album, but I've got so many songs. And he said, well, you have to be methodical. And he said, I can guarantee too, Rick, that you have got 4, 5, 6 songs that you always go back to. When you go to the piano or go to play on your guitar, there'll be 4 or 5, 6 songs that you always go back to that are your favourites. He said, start with them. And that's what I did. I've just got, I don't know how many songs I've written, but it's hundreds. And I went back and listened to some old demos from the early 80s. And there were a couple of songs there that I've always loved. And I do now and again play them, and I thought, I'm going to re-record them. The thing that Joe Jackson said was, just because a song's old doesn't mean it's bad.
Oh.
And I thought, great, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. And I re-recorded them.
It must bring back so many maybe emotions, or not triggers, but it must be quite a strange experience listening to something that you wrote so long ago.
Yeah.
Could you sort of see an overarching theme of the way that you wrote songs, or did it take you back to emotions that you were feeling at that time?
Yes, I guess so. Especially the ballad, because I wrote it about someone.
Yes.
And I sent it to her.
At the time?
No, I sent the recording of it because we're still really good friends.
Recently?
I won't say who it is. She was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Thank you so much."
And it wasn't the same person that you wrote Nobody Else about?
No, it wasn't.
You're a romantic.
Well, I just love writing ballads.
Yeah.
It's my forte. It's my strength. I would love to just write ballads for people. My whole songwriting life, I've been searching for the perfect ballad. I've been searching for that. I think I've got it on this album. I think I've written it. Not that particular song that I was just talking about.
Which one is it?
I wrote it about my wife. It's called Jane. I only started writing that about 3 or 4 years ago, so it's kind of a new one for me. And she didn't know I was writing it. So when I came time to doing vocals and stuff like that, I had to wait for Jane to go out, because I was recording at home. Oh, you're going to Pack and Save? Okay, cool. I've got an hour. Right, I better record these vocals, otherwise she'll know I'm doing it. And then when I finished it and mixed it, I played it to her, and it was so cool. She was crying and it was really lovely. And I thought, perfect.
Rikki Morris, you're heading out on tour. It's going to be quite a different set to that Dudes set that you played on Saturday night.
The absolute antithesis, I would imagine.
Yeah. You're going all over the place. Auckland, Nelson, playing in Lincoln, Christchurch at the Shelter. That's such a cool special venue.
It's a really cool place. That's the Parsons place out in the countryside, yeah.
And then awesome. Tauranga, and then finishing off in New Plymouth on the 8th of September. Yeah. So we talked about you being match fit, or maybe not being match fit for Saturday night. Yeah. Are you going to be match fit? Well, it's a different energy.
It's a different energy. And the Auckland show I'm playing with my band, but the other shows are much smaller venues. So I'm just taking Chet O'Connell with me, my saddle partner, and Oni. So it'll be a lot more intimate and a lot more kind of acousticy. But we'll still be playing those songs, and we'll throw a few curveballs in. We might even do a dude song, I don't know. We'll see. But it will be a totally different vibe.
Not Bliss.
No, not unless someone really twists my arm or pays me a lot of money.
So after the tour, and I know a lot of people will be asking you this, but after this, celebration of this new album, do you think this has motivated you? Do you think this has sort of started a new energy for you?
I don't think I'll be rushing out to do another album. I think, I don't know, it's been an interesting exercise, the whole thing.
Well, the music industry would have changed so much since 1988.
So much. My profile is actually, I don't have a profile. So, trying to get people out to shows it's really hard.
Oh, Rikki Morris, congratulations on the new album. Can't wait to see you playing live. We'll have all the dates up on our website. What song shall I play now?
I reckon you should play The Saddest Sound, which is the first song on the album, which Ian, my brother, wrote. Ian wrote it when the Dudes broke up in 1980. He wrote a whole bunch of songs. So it probably would have ended up being a Dude song if they'd stayed together. Yeah, it's kind of, the album is dedicated to him. He was my biggest influence, definitely, as far as music is concerned. And I miss him terribly. So there's a little count-in at the front of that song, and it's actually him counting in the demo that he did. So it's kind of cool. But I just love that song because it's so obtuse. It's like chordally, it's like, what the heck is going on here? It's a very unusual song, but I love it. I love it.
Beautiful. Let's hear it. Rikki Morris, thank you so much and well done on the new album.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps up another Music 101 interview podcast. I was speaking with 80s pop culture icon Rikki Morris, who has just released his first album in many, many years called About Time. I like it. Go and listen to that album. The first track on the album is so beautiful. As you heard, it was actually written by Ian Morris, Ricky's older brother. The album is a tribute to Ian Morris, as Rikki said. So go and listen to some Sex Pistol, The Game of Love, such a good one. And then, yes, you must go and listen to Nobody Else and try and hold yourself back from singing. Until next time, take care. Share this interview with a Rikki Morris fan that you might know, and make sure you follow us, rate us if you like the podcast, and join us next week for another Music 101 interview podcast.